This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Sean Preston.
Welcome to today's episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. Today we have a good neighbor on the show. His name is Kris Taylor from Legacy Home Inspection. What's up, Kris?
What's going on, Sean? Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
No worries. I'm still working on my second coffee, so we'll see how this show goes today.
That's all we need, man. That's all we need. That's what keeps us going is that caffeine, right?
So since I started doing the show, I've said it a few times, getting somebody new on the show where I've never met before is always fun. You get to dive into some pretty interesting questions, but it's always nice to have somebody that I kind of already know, which is nice. We've had an opportunity to meet before, and it's been a while. It's almost been a full year, so happy to reconnect with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's good to see you. It's good to see your face again. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah,
I didn't have a mustache back then, but, so I don't know. Could be good, could be bad.
No, it looks good. You're rocking it. Yeah, you just keep catering it though. You keep rubbing it.
That was an awkward thing. Like, people don't know. So Kris came in and he gets, like, before I add him into like what you guys see here, I'm sitting there on his website just playing with my mustache for like a good 10 minutes and he got to see the whole thing.
It's all good, man. It's all good. I appreciate
Anyways,
it.
I'm sure the reader or the listeners are chomping at the bit here. So why don't we dive into it? I already know some, but let's go through it again. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Well, we've been in operation 4 years now. We're transitioning into the fifth year. When we first established ourselves out here, we focused on the GTA area, and we catapulted to the top of the list in terms of most reputable businesses for, in terms of customer care, in terms of quality. We transitioned to the Barrie Simcoe area about a year and a half ago. And again, we catapulted right to the top of the list, right? So we're an all-encompassing home inspection company. We prioritize our clients and we make sure that, your purchases are protected, right? We're here for our clients. Yeah.
And there's a little bio on your website, and having the opportunity to sit down with you and recollect those prior conversations. You're going to get into that all day.
That's all I see.
The podcast later, you're going to be like with a meeting with a client or in a home inspection, you'll be doing this.
Yeah. It's all good, man.
You've actually been quite successful. You said 4 years, and you've also been on some famous TV shows as well too. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
I haven't been on the TV show. We've worked alongside, some HGTV stars. I mean, HGTV is a sensitive subject, right? Because a lot of people have varying opinions on it, right? I mean, I don't like to focus on that as credibility. I started as a commercial contractor, going back 20 years. When I was a commercial contractor, I was one of the main contractors for the Aldo Group. So Aldo Group oversees like Miss 60, West 49, Spring, the actual Aldo shoes. They have a long list that we dealt with all the retail conversions. I did that for quite a few years, right? And then I transitioned into policing. And then when I started policing is when I started home inspecting, because it was a very easy transition for me to go from commercial to residential, right? And then when I retired from policing a few years back, I focused primarily on home inspecting. Yeah.
Is it like a 50-50 split for residential to commercial, or mainly residential, or?
No, to be honest, I try and focus more on residential. Where I'm at now for myself personally is residential is very simple for me, right? So it doesn't take a lot of brain power. A lot of the stuff is very, very similar. We do a lot of commercial as well. But commercial can be a lot more complicated. So I just have a preference of residential, but we do residential and commercial as well. Yeah.
Like, I've always been curious, like, what's the big difference between commercial and residential, and why is commercial so much more complicated?
To be honest, it's not a simple answer. There's slight building code changes. Commercial buildings are a lot more complex, right? Because you have so many varying styles of businesses. Office spaces can be compared very much to residential, right? Just different variances. But when you get into, restaurants or industrial complexes, it's a whole lot more complex, right? Because then you're involving heavy machinery, you're involving, the ins and outs that are very specific to that company or to that type of business. So it just becomes more complicated, right?
Right. And so then that makes a lot more sense where, you're dealing with a couple in a home. It's a lot more simple.
Yeah, and I mean, the older you get, the less complexities you want, right? So
Yeah.
that's the goal anyway. Do we ever get there? I don't know, man.
I'm starting to get there.
Still working on it, right?
Starting to get there. You touched on it a little bit. I always love this question. Everybody has a journey that they go through when they start their career. Some stay in the same line of work. Others make some changes. Some start in different areas of the country for where they were born, and they ended up moving around. And you mentioned you were a police officer before, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you make that transition and why from policing over into home inspection?
You know what? It's always a complicated conversation because it's not a simple. I did A, then I decided to go to B, then I decided to do C. Right? I mean, I have this conversation with clients all the time because they're very confused how you go from policing to home inspecting, right? Especially in this market, which we can touch on a little bit later. I started as a commercial contractor, but working for the retail chains, it was primarily graveyard work, right? So, I ran a crew of around 40 to 50 people, right? Our main goal at the time was to essentially renovate these stores overnight. And the older group they don't really care about how much it costs. All they care about is in that morning, that store is open, period, right? So, but the problem with that is it's all graveyard work, right? So you feel like a vampire doing it, right? And policing was always a dream of mine, so I transitioned into it. And like I said, home inspecting was an easy way to kind of augment the shift schedule. But when I left policing, primarily due to knee injuries, home inspecting was a good transition for me, and I really enjoyed interacting with the public. Right, I enjoy having real conversations with people. I enjoy connecting with people. I could disappear into my house and never be seen again. Right. Some days I like that, right? But I enjoy being out in the public. I enjoy working with people. And then at the end of the day, we're here to protect people's investments. So it's kind of like a weird pleasure just to connect with people, right? So to have a real person-to-person interaction, and it's almost always good, right?
Yeah, no, you're definitely like me. I mean, I'm a social butterfly. Some people, being that extrovert, that kind of refills the battery. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're talking all day or doing 6 back-to-back podcasts, I will say I'm fried, but it fills my cup to dive in and have deep, meaningful conversations. That's what it's about at the end of the day. When you're connecting with another human being, doing human being things, as I like to say, it builds trust, it builds influence. It's something that definitely should be shared, and absolutely enjoying the conversation so far. So while I was waiting for you, because we actually touched base like 2 or 3 times on the phone, trying to like organize and book the podcast. You made a funny comment to be like, "Oh my God, I'm talking more than you, and I'm talking to my wife in the last like couple hours, right?"
Well, I don't think we should air that part. I don't want her to see that, right?
There's a question I never got the chance to ask you. It's a very curious question. Every industry has them, but what would you say, or if you'd be able to tell us about any myths or misconceptions that you hear about, in your industry?
I don't think we have very many myths. I mean, the biggest misconception, only because it comes up honestly probably daily, is a lot of people think the home inspection industry, specifically in Ontario, is regulated, right? So it's not regulated here. And it really comes down to if you're protecting your purchase, if you're protecting your sale, if you're here, whether you're inspecting for, foreign workers or immigration, or whether we're doing WETTs, you got to make sure that your inspector is qualified in their area, right? And that's really the biggest thing. Everyone kind of has a blanket around it, thinking everyone's the same. It's just like every trade, right? Even though they have their licenses, every trade is going to be different and conducted differently. However, home inspecting has no licensing, no regulation. So it's really, I think that's the biggest misconception with people. Because, I mean, you have people that call around and always want the cheapest price, and you're always going to find that, right? But it's very important that you do your research into the guys to make sure that they're right for you, right? There are good guys out there, but there's a lot of guys that don't know what they're doing, right? So it is really buyer beware, right? Be very careful with who you're working with, especially when it's the biggest investment, right? You're buying a home, that's your life savings for every person, right? So I think that's probably the biggest misconception, because people are very surprised by that.
Well, yeah, definitely. I'll fess up and say, when I got my house in 2019, that was right when everything was starting to boom, before COVID there, when the housing market started going. And I ended up putting my down payment down on the house. I lost it initially, and then the financing got shaky. I got lucky because my realtor ended up finding out. I had a good family friend who kind of did like a half-ass kind of home inspection, and it turns out that after I got the house, my furnace went right away.
But that happens sometimes too, right? I vet a lot of reports for a lot of brokerages, and I see a lot of reports by some guys that are doing this as a profession. And sometimes you're better off getting a GC. Sometimes you're better off getting the trades in there, right? It really depends on that person's background. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? And sometimes you can't forecast a furnace, right? It's very challenging sometimes, right? It's never really black and white. All you can do is just be careful, right? So it's not always a bad thing, right? Because I know a lot of people are adamant on having trades come through, and all the power, man, right? If they're good at what they do, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely not putting fault there, but I did end up having a home inspector come in later, about a year and a half after. We were trying to figure out what was going down in the basement. So I had some mold testing done, I had some other things done. Everything ended up being perfectly fine, but I kind of followed him around a little bit because I was a little curious on, I never had one of those before. Like, what goes on? Like, I need to kind of learn this stuff too. Like, what do I look out for? Right. I mean, education is the biggest thing. It's one of the big powers in our publications, to be able to write in and, over time getting taught this stuff, especially for like somebody like my age, right? I'm only 34. So you don't get to know this unless you experience it, right? So definitely a very, very important thing. Do you find that when you're going into doing home inspection, are people curious generally? They kind of follow you around and want to learn stuff, or they generally kind of hands off and kind of let you do your thing?
There's two sides to it, right? I mean, the realtors like to separate me from the clients, and I appreciate it sometimes, depending on if you have challenging clients or not, right? But they like to separate because they like the inspection to go quicker, right? I prefer to have the clients present because, with our reports, because we have a regulated background, because when I started the inspection company, we actually started in Alberta, right, where they regulate their home inspectors. So coming out here, we bring the regulation kind of with us. So the report is always terrifying, right? It's always scary to see, and it's always better for the homeowners to be there and see everything, because then they can really understand it. Because there's one thing to report on it, there's another to really understand what's going on, what the proper remedy is, to kind of keep in perspective for the purchase, right? It's not end all be all, right? Most homes are very, very simple. There's some costly repairs to them, right? So I prefer it when homeowners walk around. It makes my life easier, to be honest. Right? It's even better when I have trades, right? So,
trust and influence gets built because they're seeing you do your thing. You point out and say, "Hey, did you ever know this?" Or explain that that particular thing to them, and all of a sudden their eyes get open and go, "Oh wow, no! Like I would have never probably ended up looking at that," for example.
Exactly, and we'll recap on mold too, right? Everyone thinks that when you have mold, it's the house is toast, we need to burn it down, right? It's just not that simple, right? It depends where it is. It depends, if there's a moisture content. There's so many factors to it. It depends on the type of mold, depends where it's located. It's not as simple as say, hey, we have mold, let's pull a pin. It's just not, it's not that simple, right? Everything has a little bit more to it.
You would have lost your mind. I was with a roofer last week, and he showed me a picture. He's very thorough how he does it, and he always goes in the attic as well too. He doesn't just reshingle type of thing, right? And he showed me this picture, so clearly the ventilation was wrong, right? And the whole panels going up and down the roof were black. You could see the trusses, and everything else was black. I didn't know what I was looking at the start. And he's like, "No, that's mold, man. Like that lady should be out of her house." Now he can only go as far, but that's unlivable in that house. Like, it's dangerous. Like, you could die, right?
Yeah, and it's so common. Like black mold in the attic is so common. It's almost always the access hatch and insulation, right? Or the soffits are blocked. Almost always, right? But you'd be surprised. Some days I'll go like a couple days without seeing it, and some weeks it's like inspection after inspection after inspection after inspection.
Wow.
Right? It's pretty wild, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So most people know I'm the type of guy that likes to have a lot of fun. Had some fun on the weekend. It was great time. And I always like to ask, because you can't be this, boring home inspection guy going in, a robot. Kris definitely likes to have some fun. What kind of fun do you like to have, man, when you're not working?
God, man. Now I turned 40 this year, so maybe I guess I am that boring guy, right? I got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. That is my life, man. Like the life is the kids, right? So I mean, where I'm at in my life too is I really value and appreciate my family, right? Everything really is about them, right? I've been around the block. I've done a lot. I've been very successful in what I do. Everything is about family, right? I don't usually do a lot for myself. I'm in the gym a lot, but I wouldn't call that fun, right? The rest is really, my life revolves around those kids, right? It's like, what can we do for them today to keep them off the screens or the video games, or where can we go today? What can we do today? What can we do tomorrow? Everything's kids, man. My fun is my family, as lame as that sounds, right?
Definitely not lame, man. So the long weekend, you had a long weekend, the family day long weekend. You get to anything fun with the kids?
Yeah, actually we went tubing. We went up to the local hill.
Oh, nice.
I got stuck working on Monday, and I paid for it because I immediately got sick. So I got dragged me on a family day. I got sick, and then I'm just getting over it now, so I'm a little bit nasally. So it's good timing for this podcast, right? But no, it's good, man. It's always a good time with them because they're good boys. Yeah, they're very good boys.
Okay, so you got 2 boys.
Yeah.
What are their names?
Jack and Charlie. Yeah.
Jack and Charlie. Nice. Which one's the troublemaker?
The youngest, the little redhead. Yeah. His brother's a sweetheart. Charlie's a good boy. He's like his mom, just defiant, right? Yeah. Just fights the power. It's all good.
Just fights the power. I love it. I love it. Can you share with us, or maybe describe, a hardship or like a life challenge that you rose above that, maybe say that, because of that challenge, you were better for it, you were stronger for it?
Yeah, you know what? And I'm gonna recap back on family here, not to reference Vin Diesel or Fast and the Furious, right? But in relation to policing, I've been dealing with a lot of suicides over the last couple of years, and that's been kind of a hard chapter for me. And there's more backstory to it, right? But there's been a lot of suicides, and those hardships, not necessarily on myself, just more the mental health, right? It really makes you appreciate your family, right? It really shows you what your priorities in life are, because business is business, but your family is all that really matters at the end of the day, right? So dealing with these struggles across friends and family and stuff was really eye-opening. And I still struggle with it, every couple of weeks or so. But it's a family, man. Spending time with the family, being with the family, that's all that matters, right? And again, it reflects into the home inspection business, right? At the end of the day, we're here to help homeowners, right? And a lot of people don't think that. They think we're just a one-time transaction, right? At the end of the day, we're here to take care of you as much as we possibly can, as much as we can possibly see, to kind of make sure you guys are taken care of, right?
Oh, great answer.
That was a good plug, eh?
I agree. I agree 100%. I just had something similar, fixing my own and miscommunication between siblings and girlfriend and stuff like that. And it's been 4 months before we got on the same page and finally got to have that conversation, and everyone's crying and hugging and all that stuff. And, you realize when you don't have it, and then when you get it back, and how important that is. Yeah,
it completes you, right?
Yeah.
Like I do therapy with my wife, right? I do my own personal therapy. It's personal health, man. It's family.
Oh yeah.
I wonder how many times there should be a drinking game for how many times I say family on this. Family.
Jeff and I will cut this one. And I'm over for the weekend and be like, "Yo, I got a game for us to play. You got to order the podcast." Yeah. Having it back, and you realize it's like that old saying, right? You don't realize what you have until you lose it, and you get it back, and that's when you really, if you ever get those second chances. Some people don't.
Yeah.
Understand and holding on a little bit more tighter. They're the ones that'll never go away, right? Friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, they come and go, but family, you're stuck with them, right? So
yeah, it's true, man. Well, those are your ride or dies, right? So sometimes your friends become your family, right? So depending on your relations, right?
Yeah, 100%. What's the one thing that you
to be honest, I've kind of already touched on it. One thing that really separates us from other inspection companies is that we're always here to help you, right? Once we do the report, part of our reports, they're so comprehensive, everything's so heavily documented. If anything happens, if there's something that fails or there's leakage and you're not sure what it is, we're still here to help you. It doesn't cost them anything, right? So it's really that it's so corny to say, man, like we're here for you. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, but genuinely we're here, right? Obviously you don't want people abusing it, right? Where it's like, every day it's something, right? But at the end of the day, if something happens, you're not sure what's going on. If you have trades out and you're not sure about pricing, if you feel like you're getting hosed, just reach out to us, right? We're the best in the market, to be honest with you, right? So that's what we're here for, right? And that's really what separates us is helping you with your home, ensuring your purchase is there, ensuring your investment is protected. That's what it's there for, right? Whereas most people don't offer that. So it's kind of hard to touch on. And I do with clients all the time, but usually they just see white, right? When you're throwing all these terms and all these explanations and explain process to them, they don't hear a lot of stuff like that, right? So,
right.
Yeah, man.
Well, you're a good guy. You got a great business. I can definitely vouch for you. So those listening to the show, 100%, just like Kris said, reach out to him. He's a trusted source, knows his stuff, and definitely he'll take care of you. And for those who do want to reach out to you, Kris, how can they contact you? Honestly,
just through our website is probably the best way, right? Normally I give everyone my cell anyways, but I don't know how good you are at your podcast yet. I'm just kidding. But yeah, just through the websites. Honestly, if people need help, whether they utilize us or not, if they're looking at homes and they see some messed up stuff, send me some pictures, man. I'll give you answers online. I'm not gonna nickel and dime people. At the end of the day, I'm here to help you, right? So
beautiful. Well, Kris, thanks a lot for coming on the show. It was amazing to reconnect with you and have you on. I think definitely be eye-opening for people to get to know you, get to know your business, and want to thank you again for coming on the show.
100%, man. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Midhurst. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpmidhurst.com. That's gnpmidhurst.com or call 705-413-3775.